So the whole motivation to host these events was so that we can empower more folks to build companies that are really scaling and getting to that revenue number. So we started hosting different workshops. I know some of you folks attended those. We covered topics around acquisition, retention, monetization. And now this time around, we have this series where we're bringing in people that have done it. So we have Vitalii from Stan. Anyone heard of Stan before? So a lot of people know Stan. So they've been building an incredible company that we're going to dive into. Vitaly and I met actually around last year, this time. We grabbed dinner in the East End and we were just talking about growth stuff. And since then, we've been kind of somewhat in touch, through text, just talking about different growth things. So it's great to have Vitaly here. The cool thing about Vitaly is also he's done about 800 skydive jumps, which caught my attention because I've only done 30. So I also have my license, but I was like blown away by the 800 jumps. I think by the time you were 18 as well.
Yes, strange things you have to do to pay for the education in Canada as an international student.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't pack a parachute yet, but you're a master at it. So yeah, it's cool to see Vitaly and the journey that he's been on. Anyone follow Vitaly on LinkedIn? So you can follow, like he shares pretty heavily on the whole Stan journey and built a community around that. So it's been cool to have him here in person so you can kind of interact. And then Ashley, I met earlier this year. So Ashley has been building communities at Airbnb, Wix, Class Dojo. So she's a community pro and she reached out to me through a platform called Contra. So she found me on Contra, which we had the speaker or the founder of last time. And yeah, we've been kind of collaborating on building the community in Toronto for Stripe. So it's great to have both of these amazing founders and community builders here. So we're gonna dive deep into it. So we're gonna start with Vitaly. So Vitaly, tell us a little bit about kind of your journey in getting into Stan. I've definitely been like reading up quite a bit on it in terms of like how you guys started. But curious to learn a little bit more about like how you got involved with Stan in the first place and how it all kind of came about.
Okay, so when did you start? 5 years ago. I've probably done all the mistakes every first-time founder make. Build in isolation, never talk to a human being, only focus on your own problems, put something on Google and hope people are going to come, build the wrong thing 16 times. In the beginning of my journey, one of the things that I always wanted to do is to work for myself. So I had this intrinsic motivation. I didn't know what it is. I didn't exactly have passion for any particular space. I had passion for building. I was very excited about software. And I was working on an idea for a couple of years, pivoted a bunch, started getting some early traction. Had a customer who was using the first version of the product and making money on the platform I was building at the time, calls me up one day and says, hey, I know this guy who is building something very similar, fundraising, looking for a technical co-founder. Do you want to meet? And I said, sure. We hopped on a Zoom call, spent about a month founder dating. It was one of the most random and significant meetings that I've had in my life. And we decided to work on Stan 1 month in. Didn't know each other before. It was the middle of COVID, 2021. Things were hot at the time, creator economy and crypto. And my co-founder had a vision for building a company in creator economy. And it so happened that from the technical point of view, technology-wise, I've built 70% of it by the time he established who he wanted to build that for. And I met a person with whom I've had very complementary skill sets where we both came from the same immigrant hustler background, wanted to create something bigger than ourselves, completely different to each other. And then we went on a journey building something. The first decision that we made is we're only going to hire and work with people who are better than us. That stemmed into the first hiring principle that we can talk a little bit more about. Hire the top 1%, pay top market. 3 years from that time, we built a company that was making $30 million in ARR with a team of less than 30 in just under 3 years. And it was quite a journey. And I'm assuming we're going to talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So your co-founder, that's John, right? I know some people in the audience that always have like a challenge finding co-founders, right? Like, so you said you were going through this whole founder dating thing. What was that all about? And how did you like realize that John will be the co-founder for you?
It wasn't quite founder dating as a thing. It's very similar to the actual dating, and it's like, if this is the point that you're really focused on, you're going to have a really hard time. What's helpful is being out there and kind of living your life and being open to opportunities, and things are going to eventually. What I was focused on is building something that I believed in, and I was having exposure to the world through it. By being part of the ecosystem, you all, for example, being here, means that you're part of the ecosystem, and whatever you're trying to achieve in the end game, perhaps there's going to be people that you're going to meet who can become potential co-founders, who can become potential employees, who can become potential investors. And had you stayed home today, none of that would have happened. So for me at the time, it meant just building and cold DMing people and asking them to try to use my product, having few customers, spending time with them, and the opportunity just comes to you at some point. You have a chance to take it or leave it, but you have to be somewhere. If I was to offer a perspective on how to find a co-founder today, I think there is a very straightforward method to getting there. And the question that I would ask everyone in the room is, how do people know what is it you're actually working on? How many people here make content anywhere? Okay, good amount. You're all doing the right thing. Many people who are trying to start something, they like sit in their basement trying to create something, trying to live on the internet, and it's like it's a very like pushing the boulder up the hill type of emotion, where it's like, I'm going to build something good, and then I'm going to do a few things, and then things are going to happen. And it's like, no, maybe, but unlikely. When we are building in public and when we are documenting the journey, we are putting the message out there into the world that tells everyone what we are working on and gives an opportunity to people who might be somehow involved or tangibly connected to discover and reach out to you, whether it is potential co-founders, whether it is employees, whether it's investors. That's the method that I would double down on, and just be very clear on who I am, what I'm building, what I'm looking for through the method of content strategy, and the right things will happen in time.
Yeah, it's always been interesting to kind of just follow your LinkedIn posts. I find them like really fun to like kind of just follow the journey and see you folks kind of build a community around, while you're building, doing kind of building in public, right? And I guess like with Stripe as well, right? That's part of it. The building in public, building the community around what you guys are doing is some of the initiatives that you're working on, Ashley. So would love to learn a little bit about how you got involved in community building and this whole chapter with Stripe.
Yeah, so my journey to community building was a bit circuitous because also the role of community manager didn't really exist when I started my career. It was something that came about later, and it was something that I kind of got to help craft, which was nice. But I was actually working in the art business. I was talking to somebody in the audience about this earlier. I was actually selling 19th century American paintings, and I didn't like it at all. I love the art. I didn't really like selling the art. And so I started an arts nonprofit with some friends who felt the same way. And we were looking for a space. Where were we going to do this? And this new startup nobody had heard of at the time called Wix, you might have heard of it now, actually had started this idea, this crazy new idea no one had heard of at that time called co-working, because co-working wasn't a thing at that point either. And they were running a space called the Wix Lounge. So we had our first exhibition there. And I fell in love with gathering people around a theme, around a cause. And the founders of Wix met me through that. And they said, "Hey, would you want to come run this space?" I was like, "Well, I don't really know anything about tech or websites. I don't really know anything about managing a space." They're like, you've run events, you have a passion for this, like just try it. And if you hate us, you can quit." I was like, "Okay, that sounds reasonable." I ended up being at Wix for 7 years. And so joined when it was a less than 100 person startup. I was there through the IPO. So I went from watching it be a flash platform to actually doing Super Bowl commercials. It was a wild ride, and really discovered during that time that, oh, this thing I'm doing, I think it's community. And there were several other people in New York and San Francisco at the time that were on a similar journey where they're like, "Oh, my job is gathering people. It's community." And so a group of us actually started to get together. We started to meet. And that's really when the profession of community management started to form. It's like we kind of discovered, like, this is the thing we're all doing. We should start to talk about this as a profession and codify it a little bit and share best practices. And I love that. That's why I'm in Toronto. I'm here for a community conference because that continues today. But so I was at Wix for 7 years, and then I went to Airbnb. Started on the experience host community team, building the community from scratch there. It was a brand new product. then moved over to homes during COVID and got to massively scale the host clubs program from, I think at the time it was 10 host clubs to we had, I believe, something close to 1,000 host clubs by the time I left Airbnb. And then I got to be at Class Dojo, which is an ed tech company, and got to lead the teacher community team there. And then joined Stripe in January. And once again, getting to build the community from scratch, which is just my favorite thing in the world, is getting that blank page.
Yeah, totally. So, as we were talking before, you were mentioning that, you have to send these like regular reports to the CEO and founder of Stripe on, hey, how the community is doing, right? And it's obviously a big focus of the founders. So the theme for tonight is like, how community drives growth. And, as you folks have attended maybe some of the lectures in the past, we've talked about acquisition, retention, and monetization. So I'm curious to learn from both of you, right? Like as you folks built these communities, at Stan and also at these companies that you've worked at, how it's actually translated to actual revenue growth. So I know for Stan, the initial revenue growth was through a lot of the social platforms, right? Like you guys got majority of your initial users to Instagram or TikTok through like your co-founder John's posting. I would love to learn more about Vitaly, the journey to the first million in ARR, because I know we have quite a few people in the audience that are just like building startups and starting to generate that revenue, but hitting that first million is always a bit of a struggle and challenge. So curious to learn more about how you guys got to that, and then kind of built that engine.
The journey to the first million in ARR is the most fascinating part of the company I've gotten a chance to experience, and we learn a lot on the journey. One thing that I think is really important to understand for everyone who is going through the transition or preparing to go through that phase is when we are thinking about building something or when we are thinking about product, mistake a lot of people make, they don't think about distribution as part of their product. They don't think of product as a flywheel where you have some sort of technology, people will come in, they will use it, they have some experience with it, and then what? A lot of time I talk to founders or someone who's been working in tech and want to start their own company, the conversation goes and it's like, well, we're going to go work on something in beta, test with 10 customers, and then we're going to launch it, and then we're going to throw some ads on it, and customers are going to come, and then if they like it, maybe they'll tell their friends. It's like, no. Especially if you're building products in B2C for the actual consumer, like advertising as a strategy, 99% of the time doesn't work, and you have to think more creatively about how you're going to approach distribution. So for us, it started with the notion of how do you get your first 100 customers and what do you do with them? So the way to get your first 100 customers, there's no way around it. You just need to hustle your butt off, for lack of a better example. Instagram DMs, LinkedIn DMs, your friends, everyone who can potentially use the product. You just do what you have to do to get them on it, free or paid, doesn't really matter. And you get to build a product with them. If you're building in public, as in building and sharing the story of building at the same time, is going a very long way for you to generate excitement and anticipation of others to join your platform. But you have to really, really, really focus on acquiring the first 100 customers yourself, and then working with them in a way they absolutely love you and they love what you're building. The reason you need that, number one, is to build something that is actually good. A lot of people skip steps and it's like, oh, I'm just going to give it a 30 days. I'm going to build the best thing that I can and I'm going to launch it and then I'm going to see what happens. Well, nothing is going to happen. You want to launch something in 30 days or less. There is value in iteration, but you have to always be mindful of the fact that the customers that you're bringing in early, the next 100 is going to come from them. It's going to come from them telling their friends. It's going to come from you creating content about building with them. It's going to come from them amplifying your message when you're trying to run any sort of marketing. And you focus on building the flywheel around it. So for us, the early customers came from Instagram and TikTok DMs, where we literally was like, hey, please use this. Let me do the custom onboarding. I'll create everything for you. Wherever you have your digital products, I'm going to migrate them to the platform that we are building. You can call me anytime at midnight. We are going to fix all the problems that you're having. And you really build this affinity with people. At the same time, we created content. John, my co-founder, specifically was making TikToks like CEO, his like full-time job was making TikToks, spreading the message to the world about what the hell we were trying to build. And then people who are our customers would chime in comments that helps with distribution and amplify the message, and it's like link their friends to it for exposure and visibility. And then over time, what we've learned how to do is, because our customers are in creator economy as well, they also have accounts of their own. The question that we ask is like, well, if we are able to acquire customers by making content, how do we get our customers to make content about us? Like, what does the version of the affiliate program look like? What does the referral flywheel look like? Can people just give us a shout because we were nice to them? And like, believe it or not, they would many times if you were really nice to them. And it's not the traditional definition of community, but really building something, realizing that you're not building technology to like sell it and leave. You're building a technology to get people together behind the vision that you're building the company with, and get them to love what you're trying to bring into the world and build with them, and help them become your best salespeople. Like that first inkling of a community that is kind of boundless and not defined, what let us build a very successful business. The thing that we are really, really proud of is the 3 years that we've grown the company to 30 million ARR, we've done it with $0 spent on marketing. It was entirely creator marketing driven based on relationships and incentives alignment, where we work with our customers in a way where they would come in, they would make money on the platform. Stan is the platform where you sell digital products. So we would help them make their first dollar, 100,000, and then they would create content sharing their success with others, and they would do it many, many times over. And that would be our product distribution flywheel that allowed us to get very far without traditional marketing.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, if you've attended like some of the previous lectures, we talked about acquisition, right? So it's kind of the key 3 channels, right? You build, buy, or partner. And yeah, if you're under about $1 million in ARR, you should be focusing on kind of build strategies as Stan's done, right? And yeah, it's always interesting to kind of see how you folks acquired the first 100 customers. And for you folks, obviously it was social, right? Ashley, you were at Wix and you were also early stage there. Curious to learn more about, how you observed some of the journey there on actual community building translating into revenue growth and acquiring new users. And then maybe you can also touch on some of the other companies as well, how the community aspect has actually helped acquire new users.
So I love that you were talking about building in public as being a way of fostering community, because I think often companies start that way. And then as they grow, they lose touch. And then there's usually this crisis moment where suddenly it's like, all of our users are mad at us. I wonder why. I said, well, you lost touch. You stopped building in public. So I love that you brought that up. At the early days of Wix, it was really about engaging our users to then engage their communities. And Wix in the early days was especially focused on creatives, so photographers, web designers, artists, very community driven industries and professions. And so we would organize, actually originally just at the Wix Lounge, literally just events in New York. We would organize these events. And the early days, actually, we realized that we had this amazing asset of a physical space in New York. And so we just started offering it for free. We offered free co-working during the day. Like literally anyone could walk off the street and work. And this was before WeWork. So this was the co-working space in New York. And, it's funny. It's hard to imagine now, because you think if you did that now, you probably get like just the wildest group of people. But actually, to this day, I'll be walking down the street somewhere and somebody will shout Wix at me. I'm like, I have a name, but it's somebody who started their company at the Wix Lounge and then went on to have a successful company or to have several successful companies. We had 2 designers who ended up designing sunglasses that Beyonce wore, worked in our space. And then we also offered up the space for free at night for events. So you had to apply. We did have an application process for that. And we specifically targeted events that were tapping into communities that were going to feature our users, but then would bring in like, you're going to have an event around photographers, or you're going to have an event for artists. These are our target audiences. And we'd say like, hey, you can have the space for free, but we ask that you let us say a little bit about Wix as a part of it. And so we actually started out doing these events just in the space. And it was crazy how it drove incredible growth because it went viral. And this was also before like social media was huge. I think Twitter was nascent at the time. And so just having this space that people could use and had value out of. People started to refer us, people started to hear about Wix. But of course, it was limited. It was just one physical space. So we started to think about how can we take this magic and how can we scale it? So we started to do meetups all over the US and then all over the world. Same sort of thing of like, okay, let's go out and do these physical connections with our users and these different communities. Once again, it doesn't scale. My team was flying all over the world. And so we said, okay, how can we keep growing this magic of like this deep in-person connection that's driving growth for the company? And that's when we launched the Wix Ambassador program. So we actually, this might sound familiar to you, Zane, with the Stripe Community Builders program. We started identifying users all over the world who were passionate about Wix, who said, I'd love to run Wix meetups. I'd love to gather here. I'd love to represent Wix in this city. And so by the time I left Wix, I think we had on average 7 events a day, every single day, somewhere in the world that was entirely run by the community. And it was interesting because that in-person connection, we were able to form these deep relationships that kind of to your point, Vitaly, like we were able to foster this build in public connection, this deep relationship, but then we found a way to scale it massively at the same time.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, it's always interesting, right? Like kind of trying to get to that first million. Like you got to do things that don't scale. Like for Stan, it was about like doing direct DMs, getting those early customers, being available for them. For Wix, it was about, and like some of the other companies, just building these meetup groups and events. You know, you've
Can I add a little bit
Yeah.
I actually had a story to share that I thought would be helpful at 0 to a million, something that we've done recently. You know what that reminded me of? The scaling through the ambassador program, the franchise model traditionally for businesses. Like if you all think about how is that we have so many Starbucks around, or how is that we have so many McDonald's around, it comes down to creating a blueprint. And the first activation was like, we figured out something that really, really works, that unites people behind a particular idea. So that was the Wix folks and how they thought about the mission that the company was on, creating a few kind of activation events to get people excited, and then giving people an opportunity to create more of this. And once you achieve the critical mass, like I would imagine many people probably reach out and was like, hey, I want to do this, like, too, can you like either sponsor it or figure out some sort of an arrangement? And then it kind of spreads from there. We're actually at the very early stage of that notion at Stan. But I think it's just fascinating how this notion of giving other people an opportunity to do the work for you, which is kind of the same notion of your customers or your best salespeople. Once you have something good foundationally, the word spreads.
It's so true. And I think often the mistake that companies make is that they try to create community out of nothing. And kind of like you said earlier, it's like you already have your first group of passionate users. They're out there. You already have these green shoots of community. So it's less about finding people and convincing them to do something they'd never want to do, but instead finding those green shoots, finding those existing users that are excited about your company and empowering them, giving them a platform, giving them a program, and then you're just amplifying them. So instead of trying to create something from nothing, you're actually just leaning into the energy that's already there.
Oh, 100%. The story I wanted to share with you, I kind of forgot. We launched something from 0 to a million in May this year that actually is crossing a million very soon. The product right now is 160,000 in ARR. That is fascinating. And we've documented the entire journey, how we've done it, that you can actually go and read all of it from the very beginning, because we documented from day 0, where we had no idea what we were building. It's actually on my LinkedIn if you wanted to find it and scroll all the way back through many bad posts I've made since then, back to May this year. What happened is I was at my wedding with my co-founder, who happens to be my best man at the wedding. We took a day off while soon to be my wife was doing the heavy lifting on getting everything in shape. And we were walking on the streets of Shanghai, and we felt this fear of missing out on AI and agents, because like that was like a very new and developing topic. And it's like, hey, we've been building this thing for 4 years. We are obviously using AI, but we are not an AI first company. It feels like there's something in there that we need to explore. And then we talked about it for a while, that we looked at each other, and it's like, why don't we go to London, lock ourselves up in an apartment for 14 days and see what we come up with? So instead of going to the honeymoon after my wedding, I grabbed my co-founder, we got on a plane, and we went to London, just the two of us. We locked ourselves in, in an apartment. All of it is documented with pictures on my LinkedIn. You can read about it. And then we started like looking at it, like, all right, what are we doing? And we started working backwards, and it's like, okay, we've been creating content for LinkedIn. Generative AI is kind of cool. Seems like it can do writing. We both been posting on LinkedIn for a couple of years at the time. Pain in the ass, takes like an hour to 2 or like a day. Anyone who creates content is like can easily be a full-time job. It's got to be easier. So it's like, all right, why don't we try to build an AI agent for LinkedIn? So it's like, well, what do we need? He said, well, if you are building in public, we need a name. So we made a series. I called it Building a $1 Million AI Agent in London in 14 days. Day zero. That was the name of. Why was it $1 million? I just needed something that sounded flashy. 6 months fast forward, that's actually what happened. Manifestation principles at work. And we started building. And the way we started building it is like day zero, I literally take a picture of myself at the airport, and it's like going to London for no reason whatsoever with my co-founder. This is what we are trying to do. Like day one, the picture of us in the Uber. And it's like, we just came up with an idea. This is the customer that we are trying to build for. Like, this is what we are thinking. What happens next? People on LinkedIn, because we were building for LinkedIn, and people on LinkedIn were just following us a little bit. It's like, I would love to try it out when you're done. It's like, oh, cool. Can you put your name on the waitlist? And then it's like day 2, more people engaged. Day 3, more people engaged. Day 4, more people engaged. In 5 days, we built a demo that we showed to a few folks. They absolutely roasted it. It was like, hey, this is the worst version of ChatGPT. You guys should give up on whatever it is that you're trying to do. It was like, okay, sure. I posted some of the testimonials and quotes, like also on LinkedIn. It's like, hey, thank you for candid feedback. We are pivoting. Thanks to you. And we've realized that it's like, okay, there was something missing based on those conversations. We built something completely different. And then we unlocked something. And as we were talking with people we were building with, like those who would leave comments, it's like, hey, can we hop on a call? Like, can you give the feedback on what we are doing? On day 7 or 8, I think, and every single call, once we made progress, and we would consider it like as a pitch conversation, we're like, let us hand onboard you. Let us show you what we can do. Let's see how impressed you are. And we would always end the conversation with, it's like, how much of value is it to you? Like, would you pay for this? Some of them would say yes, because it's difficult to say no on the call under peer pressure. But what we've landed on is we got our first 7 paying customers from LinkedIn comments. They used the first version of the product, they created content with it, and then they posted what they've created. And some of those posts happened to go viral because we did figure out a good way to create something that has an opportunity to help people write viral posts that are authentically in their voice. So it's like, okay, well, why don't we point to those examples? And it's like, when I would make a post on like day 9, day 10, it's like, hey, we just made a few sales. And it's like, hey, this is the customer we've onboarded, and this is the post that they made, and it did really well. We are going to launch this on day 14. And then we kept documenting the whole thing. So on day 14, we did a big launch post with a big band in our background. It's like my co-founder and I just launched a $1 million AI agent. We are going to open the gates for 24 hours tomorrow at this time. Watch for my LinkedIn, 8 a.m. 250 people signed up on day 1. Like, many of them set up alarms to not miss it, for $100 a month product. Just because we were building in public, warming up the audience and building anticipation for what we were trying to go build. They gave us permission to charge their credit card $100, like put it there through Stripe. Having never seen the product, just purely based off of content and its promise. And it's like, this is the power of what you can do building in public. But this is not where it ended. So what we've done then, we had 250 customers who were using the product. We would watch their sessions. We would talk to many of them. We would go as hard as we can to really, really delight them with service. So for phase 2 of the launch, what we've done, we've reached out to those who had substantial audience on LinkedIn so that we could partner with them. It's like, hey, you're using this. It's really working for you. Can you help us launch this together in a similar fashion a month from now? July 6th, I think we've done it. And we organized July 6th week, where about 20 of the first wave of customers of Stanley, that's the name of the technology that we built, would help us create content and share their stories of how it worked for them. That got us to 600 paid customers just through our content and their content alone. Again, just building in public, real people sharing stories with each other on their social media channels about something that we've created. That was a critical mass of users to get the flywheel going. And then we figured out how to create this consistent content output flywheel by just helping someone to reach success on the platform, approach them at the right time, encourage them to create a testimonial by just sharing a note on their experience on LinkedIn, and just do that systematically at an increasing. Been 6 months since then, approaching $1 million in ARR, building in public, $0 in marketing.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I love the social pressure that you also add, like by posting like in 14 days, we're going to get something out the door. And then in the process, you're getting these customers, getting feedback from them as you're building. And then by the time it's launched, you already have paying customers and you're generating revenue. It's incredible. Like, I love it. I noticed Ashley, you kind of did the similar approach as you were building this Stripe Community Builders program. I remember when you were launching this, you kind of just started reaching out to a bunch of people that were hosting events and then started iterating the program as you went along as well. So curious to learn about your journey as you've been building, the Stripe Community Builders, and also in a way building in public, because I remember you were doing it on like a Slack channel, got a bunch of people just getting feedback and iterating, and you had events running while you were kind of making this program, taking it to maturity.
Yeah, I've been very lucky. I think as a community manager, you often get the chance to build a community from scratch for a startup. And I love that. But it's very rare to get the opportunity to build a community from scratch at a big company. And that's part of why I joined Stripe. Stripe's done a lot of really interesting community adjacent work over the years, but has never really had a cohesive community strategy or cohesive community team. And so Stripe hired me to do exactly that. She's like, okay, small challenge, figure out a strategy to build community for all Stripe users. And Stripe users are incredibly diverse. If you can imagine a type of business, they're using Stripe. Everything from my dentist in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to Airbnb and everything in between. And so the first place I started, and it goes back to what we were just discussing, is those green shoots of community. So I said, who is already out there doing this? I mean, Stripe has been engaging so many different tech developer business communities. There's already passionate users. There's probably people out there already doing it. And so I really just did creative Googling, if I'm going to be honest. And then search platforms like Contra, where I saw who's posting content about Stripe as I use social listening tools. But not just oh, I'm going to tweet Stripe's great, or I'm going to mention Stripe once on LinkedIn. It's no, who's actually writing blog posts about Stripe or creating videos about Stripe, or in the case of Zane, already doing meetups that mention Stripe? Who are those people that are already passionate about the brand, who already want to align themselves with the brand? And so I found those people and started to interview them and said, why are you writing about Stripe? What do you love about Stripe? And really understood their motivations, because the best community programs are built on top of really deeply understanding the user's motivation. You want to lean into that, because the more you're actually driving what they want, the more you're going to be successful. And I think that's key for building community for a company. It can't just be meeting the company's goals. It needs to be meeting the user's goals too. It needs to be at that Venn diagram overlap. And so really started to understand that there was this whole group of people out there who were using Stripe for their business, and Stripe was integral for their business. So either they were implementing Stripe for clients, they were integrating Stripe for clients, they built SaaS on top of Stripe, where essentially they are offering Stripe, but for a specific vertical. For example, we have a woman in the program who has SaaS for wedding planners, true story. That's essentially Stripe with wedding planner wrapper on top of it. And so she was really eager to say, I want to be aligned with Stripe. I want to engage this audience. I want to do it with Stripe. I want to talk about Stripe. And so I started asking them, okay, so if you want to collaborate with Stripe, in what way would you like to do it? And I kept hearing the same thing over and over again. It was actually events, which surprised me. That was not what I expected the answer to be. And so I just did a little baby pilot. Zane was a part of it. I found, like you said, I found Zane on Contra. I just was searching Stripe expert and found Zane and a few others, truly. And so I gathered this group and I said, hey, do you want to try running Stripe meetups? Let's do one meetup together. Let's just see how it goes. And like Zane said, I made a Slack channel and we like built in public. And so I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is everybody in the pilot. These are the events they're running. And in the matter of a month, I think we were able to do something like 15 events with almost 1,000 attendees with an average CSAT score of like 4.8 of a range from 1 to 5. And I said to the groups, like, would you want to keep doing this? And they're like, yes, let's keep doing it. I said, well, what would the ideal version of this program look like? And we've been workshopping it together. We met, I asked them every point of feedback. So I presented the pilot out to Stripe's founders and a lot of the C-suite, and they were like, yes, yes. Of course, Stripe's CEO said, can we have 10,000 of these people? I was like, not tomorrow, eventually, maybe. And like Zane said, I've really been sitting down with them and saying, okay, let's build the vision of this together. Let's talk about, as I'm building out, like how the scaled version of this program can look. Even things like we did RFP presentations with potential community platforms that we might use when we launch the online version of this. And we literally invited community builders to the RFP presentations to get their feedback as well. And so it's been an incredible journey so far because Stripe has really given me the space to experiment and play and work really closely with the community to build this. And I think that's why this is going to succeed, because the companies that understand that you need to build in public, that you need to build with your users, that you need to partner with your users, and that whatever you build also needs to meet their needs and drive their motivations. Those are the communities that will succeed, and those are the companies that will succeed. Companies that are trying to force what they care about on their users will be less successful.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's always inspiring to me to see like these founders building in public. I know some of you folks in the audience are also building in public. I know the founders from like Pentium. I see their LinkedIn constantly showing new updates. I think there's some other folks here in the audience as well. Personally, I find it pretty scary to kind of go out and like put yourself out there when you don't have an idea and nothing, and you're trying to build something. Vitaly, I would love to learn a little bit more about like how you kind of find the courage to put stuff out there. Maybe it's from your like skydiving career. You have that kind of just overcoming that fear. How do we kind of put ourselves out there, start building in public? What's a good kind of framework? I know it's scary for me. Curious how was it like for you when you started doing these posts regularly?
It is scary for everyone. It's borderline cringe. The first post that we put ourselves, the amount of time people spend, and it's like, what should I post about? What are my high school friends are going to like? What if my mom sees it? And it feels pretentious, and it's like no one wants to be like the influencer who is preaching at the world, and it's like how the world should be. It's weird, but it's not what content is all about. And I started getting into content. So LinkedIn is a primary platform where I'm creating, and the pivotal moment for me that got me into starting to create was a phrase that I read. Goes like, it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. And I was like, well, I want to be known by the best founders out there that I can learn from. I want to be known by the best inventors out there so that I can raise money from them. I want to be known by the best engineers out there so that I can hire them. I want my name to be walking into the room way before I do. How do you achieve that? You achieve that by doing remarkable stuff, and you achieve that by telling the story. No one is going to tell your story better than you can tell your own story. And the core mental block that I had at the time as like a technical founder, it was very uncool to be creating content anywhere as a technical founder back in 2021. Now it's more open-minded. But I was like, well, I work 16 hours a day. Like I write code. I work a lot with people. I have stuff to do. What do I have to post about? My life is boring. And I think the problem happens exactly right there, like with that mindset that my lifestyle is boring. The reality is many of us live actually very interesting lives that we can share a lot of lessons and insights about. The problem is we don't have the habit to notice it, and we don't have a habit to share. And if you change that mindset and you start with it, it's like, actually, there is a lot of really interesting stuff that's happening in my day. And what I'm trying to do is not to teach anyone something, not to like share this online guru lesson or what have you. It's like, I'm just documenting the journey and sharing what I'm up to. Now that becomes easy. You don't have to overthink about it. You don't have to over polish. You don't need to have a perfect copy. And it's like, something happened throughout the day. I've been at this conference. I talked about those things. I'm going to make a post about it, just sharing what I've been up to. Maybe point a few ideas that I'm sharing today just because they are top of mind. For some of the people, they're going to be helpful. For others, they're not going to matter, and that's completely okay. But the starting point is to just recognizing that creating content is just a form of us expressing ourselves and just describing what we are going through and getting into the habit of it. And as we do it long enough, we'll get significantly better where it's like every single day there's going to be too many things that you would want to share. And you can document them and organize them. But it's really about changing the mindset from I'm trying to make content in order to become known for that or the other thing, and really start thinking about I'm just sharing the story of me being on this journey, so anyone who is a couple steps behind me can learn from my wins and mistakes and hopefully do better for them.
Yeah, amazing. And yeah, it's always inspiring as well. You're inspiring other builders along the way, and just also showing that you're like real people, right? And I've also noticed that Stripe started doing quite a bit of that, like the founders, right? They launched the Cheeky Pint like podcast. I love like, and you can just relate to the founders and the real builders behind that really well. I would love to learn more actually about like as you've kind of grown through community building and different companies, how all these initiatives have translated to like real business growth, right? What kind of like some stats you've noticed in terms of like maybe retention for the users and the products?
Yeah, and I think the most important thing I can say about the business value of community is that it's not a cookie cutter, that it's very unique to each business, its challenges and its goals. And like I mentioned before, I think the key too is finding that Venn diagram overlap, the business need and the user need, and then how is bringing your users together going to uniquely meet that need? And that's going to be different at every single company. And it's going to be different at a company over many years. So actually, Wix is a great example. In the 7 years I was at Wix, when I started, we were really focused on community as really just like a word of mouth driver, as a brand and marketing lever. And so we were really just thinking about like how many people have heard of Wix through community. It was really just about eyeballs in those early days. But then once we IPO'd and we started doing Super Bowl commercials, the marketing ROI of word of mouth was hard to compete with a Super Bowl commercial. And so rather than kind of being complacent and saying, oh, well, I've lost my value, I started having conversations with other leaders at the company about like, what problems are we trying to solve? What are the issues with Wix today? And one of the things I heard over and over again is kind of the classic thing that happens where startup is really close to their users, they scale, and then they lose touch with their users. Wix has started to lose touch with their users. And they're like, we actually really don't know what our users want and need anymore. And we want to develop these motions so we can get more user feedback and we can engage with it more deeply. And so we pivoted from doing events that originally were more about reaching potential new users and getting the word out, and started doing events that were about deeply engaging our existing users. And we would fly product teams out and we would do meetups all over the world, and eventually with those ambassadors at scale about specific products. So say like the e-commerce team really wanted to know, like, what is the user feedback about e-commerce? So we'd do a series of meetups about it. We'd either fly product teams to it or we'd gather feedback as a part of the event. And then we'd funnel all of that to the product teams. And it was fantastic because every quarter, what we do in order to measure the impact of that is we'd say, okay, what changes did you make based on the impact? And what increase in conversion did we see as a result of those changes? And how did that drive revenue? We did see over and over again that the changes they made significantly increased conversion, which then led to significant revenue. And then we realized we were onto something. It's like, oh, like maybe we could not just help make the product better, but maybe we could even drive users further into the funnel. So we had a hypothesis of if we engage our existing users and we provide them with user to user learning, we connect them where they can learn about more ways to use the product, maybe we can actually get them to go from free to premium. Maybe we can get them from premium to using e-commerce or using the blog or other paid features. And so then we pivoted even further to that. And we found that we were able to, at significant scale, through bringing our users together, sharing the products they were using at Wix, sharing the value of the products at Wix, we were actually able to bring users along the product funnel very effectively at scale. And that was just 3 examples from my 7 years at Wix. At Airbnb, we actually were really focused on community as a lever for supply acquisition and optimization as a marketplace. And now at Stripe, we're really thinking about back to that idea of user engagement, of who are our users we might have lost touch with that we can deeply engage through community. And then how can we help them connect with other users that are solving similar problems so that they can maybe start to better understand how to use Stripe for their specific need and their use cases. And so it's a long answer to your question to say it's different at every company. And there isn't like a golden formula of like, this is how community is going to drive value. And the metrics need to be different in each case too. So I always emphasize it's important to think about what are the unique challenges of that business and how is engaging and bringing your users together going to solve that unique challenge versus just copying what another company did, because your company is going to be dramatically different.
One thing that I wanted to add to there is, as a founder, especially early stage, starting like a formal community motion is actually very, very hard, because say if you have like capital to even hire a person to do that, it's very difficult to justify ROI on the top of funnel point of view, because communities for most businesses, like ultimately they don't bring you customers. But there is one thing that helped us change the perspective on this, where we started seeing value, and this is very much, I think, like at the core of your story. It's at the notion of retention and engagement. When you think about what are companies like for an average consumer, this is like a behemoth of an enterprise that you can't get to the real human. You email their support, they get back to you in 3 days being completely unhelpful. And then you're kind of trying to work your way through. And what community enables you to do, and it's like, I've seen so much joy in people's eyes when they have an opportunity to be connected with a human behind the curtain. Where it's like, if I have just having a phone number to call, or it's like LinkedIn, what have you, just to reach out when you have a problem, like what it does to customer retention and how connected they feel with you. It is a very powerful retention strategy you've deployed correctly.
Yeah. And like you said before, then it drives the flywheel. So when that customer has a really powerful interaction with your brand because they finally talked to a human, they're going to be so much more likely to recommend it to the people in their network and the people that they collaborate with. And that drives growth. It's a harder to track growth because it often is word of mouth. We saw that actually at Class Dojo. I'm looking at Caitlin because she worked at Class Dojo with me. Sorry, I'm calling you out. Class Dojo is an edtech app. Teachers use it. And the primary driver of growth for Class Dojo for probably like the first 10 years of its life was actually teachers would use the app. They would have really positive interactions with the team. We drove all kinds of really great community initiatives. Even from the early days of Class Dojo before I was there, they would take the time to talk to teachers, to meet teachers, to deeply understand teachers, build in public for them, and teachers would recommend us. And so what we saw was like you'd have one teacher at a school using Class Dojo, and within a matter of months, every teacher in that school would be using Class Dojo. And so we actually had a program called Class Dojo Mentors. And this goes back to those green shoots of community where we empowered them. We gave them resources, we gave them materials, we gave them tools. So every year teachers do something called PDs, professional development. That's what they call it in the States. It's different in different countries. And so we realized that was a moment where these mentors could volunteer and say, hey, I'm going to give a Class Dojo training. And so we said, okay, let's go ahead and put together that training for them. And so we'd actually like arm these Class Dojo mentors with trainings with these PDs. And so we saw these great right before back to school activation moments because we'd found these people who had a positive connection with us. And then we empowered them to go spread the word. And then we saw that meaningful growth on the other side.
Yeah, it's incredible. And just building that customer love, right? It's such a hard thing when you're launching your product, and building the community and getting the feedback from users as you're launching and building products. That's something that I saw quite heavily being done at Canva, where I was, and just saw like impacted growth directly. And when you would tell people that you're working at Canva, the first thing was like, hey, I love Canva, right? Like the customer love was always incredible for me to see. But Vitaly, I think like I've noticed that with Stan as well. You folks have a very tight knit customer community as well. You've built that customer love. Would love to learn more about how you're thinking about building products that customers love. Have that deep connection.
One thing that I think would be valuable to share in this area is how not to build community. We've tried to do it twice. We are now on our third attempt. So when you're thinking about community, if something that goes through your head and it's like, well, I need to create a Discord channel or a Slack and bring all of my customers there, horrible idea.
Don't do it.
You would think that you would create all of these channels and all of these guidelines and all of these rules, and people will be talking to each other about how wonderful it is to use the product and help each other learn and grow. What actually is going to happen is that it's going to turn into yet another customer support channel where people are going to be very annoying about having you publicly deal with their technical problems. But on the first time, when we were about 10 people, because they're just like, well, we need to bring our customers together, and it's like we need a way to communicate. Didn't work out. We tried to do it the second time. We said, we're going to do exactly the same thing, but better. And exactly the same thing happened. So we closed it down again. So the third time, we are not bringing anyone together in the channels that have that potential, because what we are realizing is community is about human connection, and it comes fundamentally from the notion of you caring. It starts with you establishing a person, like Ashley, then a team whose mission and purpose within the company is to build relationship with people and find opportunities to engage. What does it mean for us to do that? I would go and I would comment on the pieces of content, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, of our customers, just to cheer them up. They did something fantastic, great. They made a post, I would send an email to help them celebrate. Mention content of other customers to each other, helping them build those relationships. We would do events and introduce people to each other so they can know of one another. But you're trying to do it from the personal connection point of view, just by engaging with them socially in mediums where they're at. It goes a long way to connect people within cities. It goes a long way to connect people around their social content and being present. And as people see you and your customers showing up in the same circles, that in a way forms a community without it being explicitly defined. So for us, a lot of it came through embodying the spirit of community from the early days without actually making one that is clearly defined, and just being out there supporting our people.
Yeah, I see that a lot of the if we build it, they will come mentality. And I think the problem is, and online communities are great. I'm not saying like don't do an online community, but there has to be a clear purpose. And what I often hear is kind of like what you said, we need a way to talk to our customers. Well, talking at your customers isn't a community. That's like, you might as well send them an email. If anything, you've given them a way to complain back in that scenario, like you said. And so when you're fostering a community, there needs to be a really clear reason the community is going to exist, what they're going to do together, and what they're going to do with you as a brand. And so that goes back, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a broken record, the Venn diagram, the user need and the business need. I'm going to say that 1,000 times. I'm sorry. But like that Venn diagram overlap is where your community strategy sits. And you need to be very strategic about like, why are we bringing users together? Why are we gathering them? Why are we engaging with them? And what are we trying to do together? Because if you just put them in a forum with no direction or no mission and no goal, they are just going to complain because they're like, oh, great, I can talk to the company now. I can scream into the void. And then you end up shutting it down because nobody's getting value out of it. Not really, because you're not answering their questions. They're not answering each other's questions. And so it's critical if you're going to launch an online community or any kind of community to really think about like, what is the goal of that community, not just for you, because your goal might be you want to talk to your users, but what's the goal for your users and what are they going to do there and what they're going to together, and be super explicit about that. Have that be part of their onboarding in the community. Have there be a clear goal and a value and a mission statement for the community, and reiterate it in the way you manage it and moderate it every single day. So that is just like the classic mistake I see companies make over and over again. It's like, oh, we'll just build this thing and it'll be magical. No. Like it needs to be thoughtful. It needs to be strategic, and it needs to be cultivated actively like a garden.
Yeah, amazing.
One of the tangible examples to share of how we are learning from our mistakes and doing it better, we had a wonderful opportunity this year to launch a challenge with Gary Vee. Very exciting opportunity for us. Been watching Gary Vee's videos for many, many years. And his thing is all about attention. Building is easy, distribution is hard, and you need to really put yourself out there to aggregate and maintain attention if you want to create value for yourself and for your business. So we partnered with Gary and we launched a 30-day challenge where we encourage people to create content and sell their digital products that they would create as a result of the challenge. Those who win will get a chance to meet Gary in person and get a personal coaching from him. He's going to do webinars every single week for the duration of the challenge. And everyone who creates a content, they would post it somewhere with a hashtag. It is a community. It is a movement that we've incentivized that allows people to go in the same direction, in the same destination, and being able to discover each other united by the same mission. And there's going to be a winners. There's going to be a remarkable experience throughout, but there's also going to be this notion that we've created in the minds and the memories of customers. And they're also going to see each other, because when you're posting content, a hashtag, you click on it, you see everyone else who is doing this, just learning from one another. Would be another example of creating an opportunity and a community without clearly defining its boundaries, but it feels like a thing. There is a sense of togetherness. There is a sense of alignment and direction. So maybe in other words, if you were to kind of translate it into what can I do today, the playbook is about creating the destination and a way for people to get there that kind of involves a form of a social movement. Would be one path you could take.
I totally agree. I think we often fixate on the container for a community. And that should be the second thing we think about, really. The first thing we should think about is like, yeah, what are we trying to achieve? What's the destination? What's the goal? What are they going to do there? Then you have your strategy. And then you say, what's the best container for that strategy? You shouldn't be starting with the container. Start with a strategy, and then that will define what container you choose.
Love that. So who's building community here? We'd love to now open it up for you folks to ask any questions. Okay. All right, I'll just pass around the mic so that it's captured.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm Sharmina. I'm founder and CEO of NovaShare Ventures, and we focus on geopolitical risk. So, of course, we work with Stripe, but we're very Canada first, and I'm sure you've noticed with the tariff war we have. I just have a question on dealing with Interact and having myself use Stripe in the past, whether it's in politics or in the private sector. How do you deal with potential competitors when it comes to fees? And what is your approach with, like, because we have e-transfers and obviously there's no significant fees there and they're immediate. Whereas with Stripe, maybe my question is more technical and in the weeds of the fees and maybe not in your particular area of the business, but that's one where as a consumer, I find really frustrating. So I was just wondering on that element, are you guys grappling with that? You're talking about communities of folks who support the product, but what about those who are frustrated and want something better? But yeah, thanks. That's it.
So maybe is the question about like how are we I'm sorry, maybe I missed like exactly what the question is. Like how are we like, gathering feedback about fees or
Is Interact so we have e-transfers, right? And there's practically no fees in those transactions, right? But there's a big cost and wait time when I use Stripe, right? So what is, like, I know you're talking to groups of supporters and getting feedback, but what about those who are,
yeah,
So this is a little bit more like technical, like in terms of like the more support related. But yeah, I guess like how do you build communities around users that are frustrated? I think that's kind of what you're trying to ask, right? Like,
no, I actually think, and I'm glad you asked because I do think a lot of brands are afraid of that. And I think it's really important to actually lean into negative feedback. I've been at companies before where they're like, oh, we're going to close our community because it's so negative. And you don't want it to all be negative. You don't want it to all be complaints. But I think it's about creating productive forums where those complaints are heard and heard by the right people and they're considered. And so I think that's sometimes what happens is that people kind of put a forum somewhere, people post their frustrations. And then I think I said this earlier, they're just screaming into the void. There's really like no one. And so actually, I think Airbnb does this very well, or at least this was built around the end of my time there, where they actually put together a host voice team and they would do things like put together a host advisory board who would represent hosts. And then we would gather things like host workshops, where we would actually meet with hosts for every stage of the product lifecycle. Because I think that is the challenge sometimes too, is if you're just listening to feedback after you've launched something, often it's too late. And so what I loved about these host workshops is we were actually meeting with hosts every stage of the way. So we'd meet with them when we were ideating about a product or a policy or how we'd change it. We'd meet with them to show them wireframes. So that's something that we'd love to eventually build at Stripe. Right now, our community is very nascent, but I think that's going to be a very critical thing for us to build, is to make sure that we have really productive channels where users can share feedback that then are being heard and then being integrated into our roadmap. That's going to be critical. Yeah.
All right. I want to thank both of you for such a great talk. I was writing down notes like crazy from both of you. My question is, so I'm in the fintech crypto space, and I'm looking to build a kind of like a curation app in the fintech space that help users. So it's going to be B2C. It's going to be like helping users to curate the best rates across all of the different financial products. And I'm wondering, for the ambassador and the franchise model that you guys talked about, do you find that for the ambassadors, have you tried like a paid or unpaid model? Because I've seen some ambassador program where it doesn't go very well. And yeah, I'm just wondering, like, if you have any insights on, like, do you kind of incentivize them with sharing like a badge? Because some people like the status is important. Or are you also sharing like the revenue part of it? If you can just kind of dive into details for, like B2C, community building, that kind of ambassador program.
Lots of thoughts, but
Oh.
So I think it goes back to this idea of really understanding the motivation. So finding those green shoots of community, those people that are already going out there and being the ambassador already organically, and understanding what motivates them. And the ambassador program should be built around that motivation. To give you a couple examples, when I was at Wix, we had a group of users called Wix Pros. And these were web designers that used Wix to build websites for other people. And we identified that actually what they really wanted was just to get the word out to other small businesses about their web design business. And so we said, oh, what if we empowered these people that are already experts on Wix? They're already talking about Wix. And we designed the program so that every time they ran a Wix meetup, we would market the meetup to every Wix user in their city, and we would feature them as a part of that marketing. So it was basically free, the kind of free marketing for their business they'd never be able to get as like a web designer in Atlanta, Georgia, for example. And often what happened is a certain percentage of those businesses would be like, you know what? I'm frustrated. Wix is hashtag that it's that easy, but also like it's not that easy. I kind of want to hire someone. And so we structured the Wix Ambassador program that way of like, okay, we understood the right persona and their motivation. We built the program to make sure it was meeting their motivation and their needs. And then actually it was very unique at Airbnb. What we found is we just had hosts who had this really visionary perspective where they understood that if somebody has a great experience at an Airbnb in their city, let's say Mexico City, they're going to go away and recommend Airbnb in Mexico City to their friends. And these hosts were really passionate about making sure all the other hosts in their market were great, because they knew that that was going to be great for everyone. Rising tide would lift all boats. And so we designed the host clubs program and the community leaders program to find those hosts and to really empower them to be educators for other hosts, because they were so passionate about that. And so what I found is like identifying the true deep intrinsic motivation of the people that are the right persona versus leaning on extrinsic motivators. Because I think when you lean on extrinsic motivators, I call it the Mary Kay issue. This is a very old reference. There's this old makeup brand called Mary Kay, and people would sell Mary Kay. And if you sold so much Mary Kay, you'd get like all these prizes, and eventually you'd get like a pink Cadillac. Well, you don't want to get to a place where you're giving all your ambassadors a pink Cadillac. That doesn't scale. So that's where extrinsic motivations will run out of steam, because they don't scale, and you have to keep just throwing things. So instead, really knowing their motivation and designing around that is going to be a lot more sustainable, and it'll scale a lot more effectively.
What stage are you at right now? Is it just yourself starting out, or have you?
Still very early stage, like very, very early stage.
No users yet?
No users. Still like still, yeah, like ideation, product research.
Pre-product market fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the most fun. Enjoy.
Thank you. It's actually a lot of fun, yeah, but there's also a lot of ideas.
In the end of the day, incentives drive outcomes. So when you're thinking about your ambassador program, you want to put something out there, especially for B2C, where someone can stumble upon the program description and would want to participate. So for us at Stan, that translated into a revenue share model where we said that it's a monthly subscription, $29 a month. If someone comes to us through you, we will pay you 20% of the revenue that we make in perpetuity. So this is interesting and that works at scale, but this is not how you start. The way to start, I would really encourage you to go really heavy in figuring out who are the first 100 people are who really love what you're building, who would spread the word just because you build something so good for them that they would just be up for tweeting about it, posting on LinkedIn, telling all of their friends with no incentive whatsoever for the value of the product alone. And if you're struggling to achieve this, to a degree, this is where we really need to go inwards. And it's like, why is this like, what's holding them back from telling all their friends? Because when we are looking inwards for all the great products that we've discovered, we would go and tell everyone. So you want to get to that point. One of the things that we see, a lot of the distribution strategies now is based on social. So we would pay influencers to give a shout to the product that we are trying to launch. We tried that early days with big and small micro influencers of all sizes. And the problem with that is if promotion is transactional, everyone feels it and it's not going to work. And it's very different when someone organically creates and just mentions the product organically in whatever mediums that they're in versus you spending a lot of capital on just someone giving you a one-time shout and then what. So the strategy there, I think it's valuable to come up with some sort of incentive to put a version of the program, whether it's a revenue share, one-time bonus, that there's plenty of models that you can kind of try and experiment and see what sticks. But I think the important unlocking factor for you would be a really double down on figuring out how to find the first few dozen to 100 people that are really so far behind your product that they will organically talk about it.
Hi, I'm Toby. Thank you both for the talk. I was also definitely taking a lot of notes. Like you guys said a lot of great things, learning a lot. And I could definitely relate to what you were saying about technical people not being comfortable sharing and thinking their dates are just like plain and boring, right? And I think definitely there's been a shift, right? And you're definitely one of the pioneers for sure. So I guess the question I have is more about, you kind of talked about pushing your community online first doesn't naturally be the best thing to do. And so at one point, let's say you create a community in person, but you want these people to be connected. And so you kind of need that online presence, because I've had the experience of doing like a student community for technical students, CS students. And I realized like the community in person was so sweet, so perfect. But how do you essentially be able to move this to an online platform, as people tend to like move around the world right now? Right, the world is so global and it's so easily connected, right? And I think online spaces are so great. So at what point and how do you get there that you could say this community should move online, and how do you ensure that that community stays alive while you move on to an online platform?
So I think you're already ahead of the game because you've already gathered them in person. I think it's always easier to move from offline to online because those people have already developed great connections. And so they'll have something to talk about. They'll have comfort. They'll have psychological safety. It's a lot easier than throwing strangers into an online space. But I guess my question is like, what is the magic of the offline community? What are they doing together? What are they getting out of it? What's the goal?
So pretty much they were learning like different technical things, basically like tech events. So a lot of things like maybe even crypto, for example, these are students that might not necessarily know about it. So someone comes in, lear- has already learned it, talks about it, teaches everybody about it, and then they even maybe get to build something in those sessions. And so generally these people are like taking on a big task together over like maybe an hour or 2 hours. And this is like events happening maybe twice a week or even like every couple days almost. So I generally see that, at least from my personal experience, I saw that students would connect really well in like these spaces. But when they were on the online platform, they were not as comfortable speaking. So it was kind of like an interesting problem. And I was wondering like what's going to miss there.
Yeah, so it sounds like the goal of community is peer-to-peer learning
Yeah.
on technical topics. And so I think one thing is when you're thinking to launch an online community, say that very explicitly. The goal of the community is to peer-to-peer learning on technical. You'll say it more eloquently
Yeah.
and more
Yeah. No
specifically than
worries.
I am right now. Say that explicitly. And then go to the folks that have been attending the events regularly and say, who would want to be kind of my like co-hosts in this community? Who would be willing to raise their hands and kind of be the igniters here, and start with those people first. Like just put them in the community first, a small group. It's this idea of like nobody wants to go to an empty party. You want to show up at the party and it's
Yeah.
lively and it's active. So start with those people and give them an explicit role when you add everyone else in. So who's going to be the person who's posting new content? Who's going to be the person who's replying to the posts? And then have a really thoughtful strategy about, okay, if the goal of the community is peer-to-peer learning, how can I ignite that every single week? What is the strategy there? What am I posting? Am I doing online events around it? And everything should ladder up to that goal. And what you'll see is that often with online communities, it feels like it's you doing a lot of it at first. But if you're doing it right, you'll start to see this momentum where it starts to take care of itself. But the way you can shortcut is by starting with that initial tight group
Yeah.
that have raised their hands and starting with that really clear mission of what they're doing there together as well. And I think another hack that is helpful is when you're onboarding into people into the community, tell them what to do first. Like just
Right.
tell them, make it easy. Even make a template. Like here's
Yeah.
the first thing you'll post, fill in this template, make it like mindless for them to do that first engagement, because making a post in a community is scary and intimidating. So you want to make it easy and you want to make it feel like, okay, I'm just checking that box. I'm doing that thing.
Thank you.
Oh, you got it.
Hi, I'm Cass. I'm the co-founder of a deep tech company. But what I wanted to share is more something that I think could be valuable for you. So for context, I'm a product leader and I work across product and growth at companies like Shopify, Amazon, and startups, including a health and wellness startups. What I want to share with you is a mental model. So you know how back in the days, the internet was online, was websites, and eventually came the mobile phone, right? The smartphone. And then what we noticed happening was everyone was taking those websites made for the desktop and we're trying to plug them on the mobile. That didn't work, right? So what you're trying to do, and I think what Vitaly shared that was key, is community is about engagement. It's about bringing people together. It's about doing something together that matters, that people really resonate with. So a little bit like what people figured out in the translation of desktop experiences into mobile experiences, a great mobile app achieves a very specific thing. You don't take everything and put it there. The second parallel is be creative about what is the format. Like a community doesn't have to be a forum. Like I grew up playing video games. That was the dopest and probably the oldest online community that I still know to this day. Right? Like we used to play together, talk. I had friends across the world. Like it was amazing. So give them a purpose. Maybe it's going to be a game. Maybe it's going to be a step challenge, which is what I did a lot in health and wellness, which you see a lot. Like you don't throw people into a forum to do, to talk about health and wellness. That's boring as hell. Right? So we gave them something to do. Right? So maybe it's a game. But what is one thing that could translate well online? Because what you're doing today in person, when they're here, might not be exactly what would translate well when they're online across the globe. But you have to try different things to engage them in a way that is meaningful, brings them value, and brings them together. But don't just follow a simple playbook because you're doomed to fail.
I think I should be good without. Yeah.
Just gonna capture.
Oh, you want for the recording? Okay. My first question would be for you, Ashley. It's very simple. Post pandemic and like with all the noise and AI slub online, do you also see the trend of more interest in in-person events? Because like I've hosted my in-person events, and like even putting it online afterwards, it creates great content and people are able to see like, wow, like there's something happening in real life in person. And like I find that when I post about those, they perform a lot better. So I just want to ask if you see other trends that are accelerating the community building. And then for Vitaly, I have mixed feelings about this. I am actually put most of my content out on LinkedIn, which is something that people probably wouldn't expect of me. I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on TikTok, I'm on LinkedIn. And I wondered, what is your thoughts about AI UGC content? Because I have mixed feelings about it. Do you think it's good, bad? What's your feelings about people using it on the Stand platform? So that's my question.
So for community trends and meeting in person, yes, I'm definitely seeing a trend of meeting in person. And it actually surprised me when I started doing research to build the Stripe community, as I thought, oh, people are going to want to engage online. They're going to ask me to do, it's like set up online channels, and every single one of them was like, I want to meet people in person. I also thought it was going to be mostly online events and industry communities. And I had so many more people like Zane who are like, no, I want to gather people in my city. I want to really bring together the startup and tech and business ecosystem in my city. So I am seeing that as a major trend, and it's surprising me, even though it sort of shouldn't. And it's exciting to see. And you mentioned AI and community. I think one of the really interesting things that is emerging right now is that AI actually loves community, is the irony. ChatGPT and other places where people are searching for information using AI, those LLMs are loving sourcing their content from places like Reddit or online forums where people are having authentic Q&A conversations. This is highly controversial when people are trying to optimize for LLMs right now, because like, oh, how accurate are those answers? But it's interesting. AI is really loving the authenticity of community and the format the conversations happen in community. And that's having major impact on the results coming out of LLMs like ChatGPT. So that's been an interesting conversation in the community industry of like, oh, wow, like actually community is really important in the context of AI in a way that we didn't expect, actually.
AI UGC content. I'm assuming you're referring to something that someone makes a post that we all know ChatGPT wrote it. Is that? I think fundamentally, when we think about content, I think it's important to understand what content is meant to achieve. It's important to start with realizing that content is not about information. If you want information, we go to ChatGPT, Google, etc. We find information. Content, to me, and for every human that I know it's working for, it's much more about them expressing themselves and connecting with their audience. And there is different tools and technologies that allow us to do that well. Like, for example, if you look back in the day into editing, and it's like we can record the full video raw, or we can get Adobe Premiere and like cut it. So it's like the simplest use of technology to do something better. I think what we are experiencing now, where something either mimics our voice off of a script that can be our script or AI generated script, messes with the tonality, lip sync, like maybe even an AI avatar where there is nothing left of us. I think in the end of the day, the question that I would start with is, are we able to achieve the goal of connecting with people who are trying to connect with us in an authentic way? Because as soon as that balance gets violated, this is where you lose your credibility online. And something that you've built for a very long time, you just lose people's trust and you don't notice it until it's too late. So I think at the very core of it, I don't see fundamental problem with using technologies to do that, so long as you stay true to what it's meant to accomplish. And if it serves that purpose, then fantastic, keep doing that. And if it doesn't, just be intentional about it, because cutting corners isn't always like easy, and sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't.
All right. Thank you both for sharing your insights. My question is a bit for Ashley, but feel free to chime in, Vitalii, as well. It's interesting that you started out being pulled in for community specifically versus being at a company and getting buy-in for it. It sounds like they kind of convinced you to come in and start it, which is a great start and super interesting. I'm curious, for those companies you worked at maybe afterwards, how was it getting buy-in for in-person events, especially when the community was from scratch? And if they maybe had something online, how was it getting buy-in for in-person events? And how would you tie that to, I mean, it's funny, you spoke about the C-suite at one of your companies, I forget which one, and you said they wanted you to get 10,000 of the same person. That's how they think in tech, right? And community doesn't scale as easily, it doesn't scale in the same way. So how do you get buy-in for that in that environment?
Yeah, it's really funny. I'm actually giving a whole presentation on this tomorrow at a conference. I'm
Where?
thinking about this a lot. But I'll give you the mini version instead of the 30-minute version. I mean, I think it's a couple different things. I think it's one, really taking it upon yourself to deeply understand the strategy of your company. What are the goals? What are the existential threats? What are the challenges? And constantly be realigning your community strategy with how it's meeting the goals or addressing the problems and having that narrative. Always also then addressing the user need, my broken record thing. And then, but in parallel, so there's like doing that due diligence of like showing here's how what I'm doing is going to drive impact and aligning your strategy with their strategy. It's also telling the story of how aligning your strategy with their strategy is then driving that impact. And so that's thinking about what we were talking about earlier is like, what is that metric? How can you measure that you're moving the needle and not just waving your hand on it? And then be really crisp on reporting on it. There's lots of different ways to do that. If I'm going to give like one practical tip on that, because I feel like I've been talking a lot of up here and like this practical tips, finding a way to connect your community, whether it's your event attendees, your online engagers with a CRM, and to be able to connect it back to user IDs. Because if you know which of your community members are which user, you can start to then map community metrics to user behavior metrics. So are the users more retained, like Vitaly was saying? Do they have higher sentiment? Do they spend more on the product? Are they using more in the product? Are they further in the funnel? Did you see their behavior change before they were in the community and after the community, or even after a specific activation like an event? And so if you're able to use a CRM or some other tool that allows you to then, heck, I've even had times where I didn't have budget for a CRM yet. So we even manually would like figure out ways to connect user ID with the community member. And that allows you to unlock a narrative of how what's happening in the community then relates back to user behavior. And once you're able to then observe that behavior, you can start to optimize for it. So you can say, oh, actually, I saw this initiative at Airbnb. We had an initiative where we saw it was moving 3 specific metrics statistically significantly. So we said, amazing. And those 3 behaviors drove revenue for the company. And so we said, amazing, let's now optimize for that and see if we can move it further. Okay, we're moving it further. Let's optimize more. So really starting to tell that story of what you're doing in the community ties back to business metrics, ties back to the user. And then finally, beyond that is actually, I think sometimes as community people, we tend to have this, like, oh, nobody understands my genius. And you just get frustrated. And instead of getting defensive, embrace your role as an educator and as a teacher and spend the time teaching people what community is. I do something at Stripe that I did at Class Dojo, that I did at Airbnb. I have a Slack channel about community stuff. And I post a weekly community snack that's just like 3 articles about interesting stuff in the community world, thought leadership about community. And I usually tend to pick articles that inform frustrating conversations I had that week. Or if I was met with somebody and they really didn't get something, I was like, okay, I'm going to find an article that explains that in my community snack. And like also if somebody invites me to speak to their team, I say yes every single time.
Sorry, internally in your company.
Internally.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So really starting to put it upon yourself that you're going to teach people what community is as well. So it's like there's 3 things. It's like 1, align your strategy with the business strategy. 2, be able to show the downstream business impact of it. Invest in the systems to do that if you can. And then 3, also start to teach people broadly what community is and its value is as well.
Just very curious on the third one. How are you involving other teams? Like, do you go to product experts and bring them as guests at events? Or is it more than that? Like, other than that Slack example, do you have a few tidbits?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways I do it. So one is actually getting people involved in events. Actually, one of the things that's cool about the events we do with community builders is we have local stripes across lots of different teams who help out with the events. But also, I will literally stock Slack channels and email updates for opportunities to reach out to a person and say like, hey, I saw you're trying to solve this problem. I think my community program can solve that for you. And then not only am I like nudging them to say, hey, I'm here. I exist. I'm reaching out to say, I want to drive value for you. Can we talk about it? And so I'm always looking for that opportunity, and they're going to be a lot more likely to meet with you and be excited about collaborating with you when you do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for the invite, Zane. Great talk. This has been so vital to me because I'm starting a real estate community building platform. So I have 2 questions. First one for Vitaly. I recently found a CTO/co-founder and agreed it is one of the most difficult things I've ever done. So my question to you is, what are the strengths that you feel like you need as a technical co-founder? what are the strengths and attributes that you love in John that you feel like is very vital for you to get to this point? And what are the shared beliefs slash Venn diagrams of attributes that you guys have together that are like non-negotiables?
I think fundamentally so when John and I met for the very first time, the feeling that we had towards each other is mutual respect. Like we felt it very early, and we felt that we really shared two fundamental values that were core to who we were as humans separately. It's absolute integrity that comes before anything. If I say something and I look you in the eye, like this is what it is without any information withheld or misrepresented. And two, we were absolutely killer at execution. It's like anything that I put my mind to, I would get done better, faster than I would promise. Same would go for John. And the reason it made sense for us working together is because everything else about us was different. Everything that I was lacking was his strong suit, and everything he was lacking was my strong suit. So for me, it comes to the values of never giving up, incredible intensity in everything that I do, data-driven, analytical, rational mindset, as you can probably guess. John is very different. John is very empathetic and customer-centered. Like when John gets up on stage and he gives a speech, 10 minutes in, you want to work for him, you want to do business with him, you want to like whatever he's doing. And it's like he just gets you in his world, and it's like you just want to pull him wherever he's going. He's really good with people, really good with customers, very extroverted, just loves people. And when you're trying to build a company, a lot of people who either build solo or don't have the right co-founder fit, there's this notion where it's like, I can do everything. And the reality is, it's like, yes, you can do everything. But oftentimes, most people are really great at one thing, and then they are average at many other things. And it's like, I can go and do the customer acquisition or public speaking or like any of the things that are not necessarily within my top 1% skill set. And the reality is that being average at something fundamental to building a company is not good enough. Like you need to have top 1% coverage across all core areas, whether it's technology, whether it's kind of marketing, exposure, distribution, however you decide to go about this. So tangibly, what I would encourage you to think about is, number one, would you be friends with your co-founder had this company not been an opportunity? I think that's a fundamental test that you need to do to decide whether you want to work with this person for an extended period of time. And if the answer is positive, it's important to ensure that they really have like 80% of what they bring to the table is the stuff that you don't have. Because if you don't cover for that, soon enough you'll be having difficult conversations around how to approach the same thing that you both have opinions on.
Amazing. Quick question for Ashley. A community lead is going to be really important for the future of my company. What do I look for when I'm trying to find my version of Ashley?
So find someone who's done it before, and find someone who can, when you meet with them, asks you really thoughtful questions about the business and what you're looking to achieve. Because if they ask you thoughtful questions and then give you thoughts and feedbacks about what community should look like based on what you tell them, you're already going in the right direction. If you meet with someone and they're like, and this is what you're going to do, or they say like, this is what I did last time and I'm going to do it again, that's a big sign that they're just going to cookie cutter their way into a community and they're not going to build something that's meaningful and right for your business and your users. So make sure the person is curious. Make sure the person, I think the other thing that I sometimes see, especially startups do, is that they essentially hire a talking head. And yet you want the community person to be great with people. That's what they're going to be do. All they can do, and they can't translate that into how it's going to impact the business. It's only going to go so far. So you want to find someone who isn't just charming, but is also charming and strategic as well. It's super important.
Hi, Ashley and Vitaly. My name's Stevan. I'm the founder of Player 2. I focus on helping founders and businesses build businesses to last, not to sell. I focus on legacy management. And in my journey, I found that building communities around founders is a little bit difficult, especially young men, because they aren't very community driven. I feel like their values aren't like really tied to community as much as I would like them to. They're not like really gung ho about going out and, doing things outside of what they want to do. They're very productive. I'm curious, Do you have any strategies on modeling like core community driving behaviors for people who are less inclined to naturally be community driven? And, just I would love to hear one example of you doing that, like maybe working with a community that wasn't very naturally inclined to community and then having them shift that and modeling good behaviors for them so they can, monkey see, monkey do kind of their way into that.
I mean, I think you're already on the right path of like modeling good behavior really helps. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about a second ago when you were asking your question about the student technology community of like, how do you actually make it so easy to engage in the community? It's like breathing. So making it really easy to show up. I think there's a couple examples. Well, there's like some general examples, but I think one thing, mistake I see, networking events is a great example of you show up and everyone has name tags and everyone's terrified to talk to each other and they don't know what to talk about. And so we often structure these network events where we put a lot of impetus on the attendees to make it happen and to make the connections. And so one thing we actually did, this is a kind of a funny example, when I was running the Wix Lounge in New York, we would have these networking events, but we made these networking kick me signs is what we called them actually, where we actually had these big signs people put on their backs. They weren't like signs, but like they were big enough that people could read them across the room. Because, the nightmare at a networking event is you start talking to someone, you're like, oh, actually, this is like not relevant for what I need to do today. This is like maybe not the best use of my time. So with the kick me signs, terrible name, I know, you could see across the room who the person was, and we would structure it where they had to write like, this is what I'm offering, this is what I'm looking for. So you could see across the room if the person was relevant before you engaged with them and you knew what to talk to them about. That's a very specific example, but I think generally it shows you like, how can you design an experience where you're not putting the burden of interaction and the burden of coming up how to interact on your community members. Instead, you're making it really easy and simple for them. There's actually a really great writer and community designer. Her name's Priya Parker. I highly recommend reading her book, The Art of Gathering, or following her on LinkedIn. She does great posts on LinkedIn about how to foster community, mostly in person. But in her book, she talks about something called pop-up rules. She said in olden times, we had etiquette that defined how we behaved and how we interacted. And we don't have that anymore, especially as we become a lot more cross-cultural and are engaging across lots of different etiquettes and backgrounds and ways of interacting. And so she says, you should set rules. Rules are good, actually, because it tells people how to behave. And so they're not wondering how to behave. So putting in place those structures and those thoughtful designs that make it easy really help. Because if you leave it up to them to figure out how to do it, they're not going to do it.
That's actually awesome. And I appreciate the way you package that because I work with executives. So then reducing friction on their executive function when they're coming into a space makes so much sense. It just makes peace for them. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's awesome.
And Zane, I think we might be getting the like clock symbol, just a heads up.
Yeah, let's do one more question and then wrap.
Okay. Hi, Ashley and Vitaly. My name is Katie. Is this me? Okay. I just had a question regarding to more examples of events. You sprinkled in a few, such as the ambassador program. You also mentioned that you measure some of your community events based on how they impact and some metrics. So would you be able to give a few more examples of other events that you've hosted or seen other strategies that you have seen impact those metrics substantially?
Yeah, so I think maybe the clearest example, I alluded to it earlier where I said like, oh, we saw this thing was moving 3 metrics and we optimized. So when I was building the Airbnb experience host community, at the time, our revenue teams had determined that there was a list of host behaviors that if hosts adopted those behaviors, it drove significant revenue for the company. And so a couple of examples were things like lowering their price or adding availability. And the Airbnb had tried everything to move those behaviors because they were so important. They'd sent emails, they'd done push notifications. None of it was working. None of it was moving it. And part of it is because they were behaviors that needed context. They needed framing and they needed gosh, it's clearly the end of my day and my brain's falling apart. They needed that social example. They needed an example. And I know there's a term for that my brain is not coming up with right now. Proof. There we go. Sorry, y'all. And so we had a hypothesis that actually what would be more impactful would be bringing hosts together. We decided to do it in events. And we did these full day events called Experience Host Summits, where we actually had hosts talk about things like, I lowered my price and this is the revenue increase I saw, and this is why it mattered. So we had a hypothesis that if Airbnb told a host to lower their price, they're like, why are you telling me to lower my price? You don't value me, Airbnb. But if they heard it from another host, they're like, oh, well, he did it and his business grew. Maybe I should do it. So we structured the events originally around all of these behaviors. We kind of had content around all the different behaviors. And then we worked with data science afterwards to see, okay, which ones before and after, which ones did we move in a statistically significant way? And not just stat sig, but we moved more than the email did, more than the push notification did. Because with community, you need to argue why the unscaled lever is more important and more impactful than the scaled lever. Because if you can do it with an email, you're going to do it with an email. It's a lot more efficient. It's going to scale. So you need to think about, like, where is the place where community will have outsized impact that the more scaled efficient thing won't have. And so with the summits, we saw that we were moving those metrics so much more because that social proof was convincing the host, that context was convincing the host in the way that our random email wasn't going to. And so we continued to structure and optimize around that. And then we were able to have this very strong narrative because we knew those behaviors were tied to revenue, and we had a clear equation the company had created about how we calculated that revenue. We were very clearly able to say, these events drove this much revenue, and they drove more revenue than this email, and they drove more revenue than this push notification. And all of that came from kind of what I was saying earlier. I was stalking Slack channels, I was reading decks, and I saw that like our revenue team had come up with this model. And I was like, maybe this is the key. Like everyone's kind of running at these levers and like this unlock that we know what revenue it drives. What if we design around that? So that's like one example I love to give because it was very precise, actually, of like we knew exactly what we were trying to drive. We knew exactly the dollar amount it was going to end up on the other side. And we knew how it was going to be more impactful than the thing that cost a lot less money and a lot less human interaction.
Great. Yeah, I wish we could stay here all night and ask questions, but the Stripe team does need to go home. I really appreciate you all asking questions. That's the thing I love about these events. Like there's just endless questions and we can keep going on forever. So let's give it a big round of applause to our speakers, Ashley and Vitaly. I guess they can connect with you folks on LinkedIn if they have any further questions. Their names are up here as well as on the Luma invite. You guys can also send me a message on LinkedIn. It's also linked up on Luma. And we can also keep the discussion going on, just join the LinkedIn group. I'll also post all the event videos and photos there as well, so you can capture those there. And thanks everyone for coming by. I appreciate you folks coming.